Hello and welcome. Today we're examining a developing situation inside Russia that could have far-reaching consequences for the country's internal stability. While Moscow continues its military operations in Ukraine, a significant domestic crisis is unfolding that receives far less attention, but may prove equally consequential in the years ahead. The Russian Federation is experiencing an acute shortage of law enforcement personnel that has grown substantially worse since February 2022. This isn't merely a bureaucratic inconvenience or a minor staffing challenge. According to official statements from Russian Interior Minister Vladimir Kolokotsev, the Ministry of Internal Affairs currently lacks 172,000 officers. To put this in perspective, that represents approximately 19% of the entire police force that should be protecting Russian citizens and maintaining public order across the world's largest country by territory. The situation has deteriorated markedly over recent years. Back in the autumn of 2022, approximately 90,000 police positions sat vacant. Just 1 year later, in October 2023, the Interior Ministry reported a shortage of 100,000 officers. Now, less than 2 years after that acknowledgement, the deficit has grown by another 72,000 positions. In certain regions, the crisis has reached truly alarming proportions. Areas east of the Ural Mountains and throughout Russia's southern territories, including the North Caucasus, have seen their police forces shrink by 50% over the past 5 years. Some districts report vacancy rates approaching 90%, meaning essentially 1 in 10 positions are filled. The Federal Penitentiary Service faces an even steeper shortfall, with approximately 23% of required positions remaining unfilled. When a country relies heavily on law enforcement to maintain social control and public order, these aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They represent a fundamental weakening of state capacity at the most basic level. Understanding how Russia arrived at this point requires examining several interconnected factors. The most straightforward explanation involves compensation. Russian police officers are paid considerably less than what many observers might expect, especially given the demands and risks of the profession. A patrol officer in Russia today earns approximately 38,000 rubles per month, which converts to roughly $380. For context, this is less than what a cashier at a Moscow supermarket might earn. It's also roughly 23,000 rubles below the average Russian salary. This pay disparity isn't new, but it has remained unaddressed even as Russia's economic situation has changed dramatically over the past 3 years. Back in 2011, when former President Dmitry Medvedev implemented police reforms, officers were earning around 50,000 rubles monthly, which seemed adequate at the time. However, salaries have remained largely stagnant, while inflation has eroded purchasing power. One former officer from the Rostov region, speaking with journalists in 2023, explained that 50,000 rubles simply doesn't stretch as far as it once did. Yet authorities have made no meaningful adjustments to compensation. Making matters worse for current and potential officers, Russian authorities have cracked down significantly on corruption within law enforcement ranks. While reducing corruption is generally positive for society, it has eliminated what many officers viewed as necessary supplements to their inadequate official salaries. Officers can no longer rely on informal payments or other benefits that previously made the low base salary somewhat tolerable. The combination of stagnant wages and eliminated unofficial income streams has made police work increasingly unattractive as a career path. But low pay alone doesn't fully explain the shortage. The more significant factor is the fierce competition for personnel from Russia's military establishment. Across numerous Russian regions, military recruiters are offering signing bonuses of 200,000 rubles or more to anyone willing to join the armed forces. That's nearly twice what a police officer earns in an entire year. Annual military salaries for new recruits often match or exceed that signing bonus amount, creating a compensation package that dwarfs what law enforcement can provide. For young men deciding between careers, the choice becomes straightforward from a financial perspective. Military service offers immediate substantial payments and ongoing higher wages compared to police work. The military is also actively recruiting from the same demographic pool that police forces need, primarily men between roughly 20 and 45 years old, who are physically capable of demanding work. Data from 2015 showed that Russian police forces were approximately 83.5% male and 16.5% female. And there's no indication this ratio has shifted significantly toward more female representation. As a result, men who might have joined police forces in earlier years are instead choosing military contracts. Many current police officers are also leaving their posts to pursue the substantially better compensation available in military service or defense-related industries. The Interior Ministry has essentially been caught in an impossible competition, unable to match the financial incentives that Russia's mobilization for the Ukraine conflict has made available. The consequences of this staffing crisis are becoming increasingly visible across Russian society. With fewer officers available to respond to incidents, reaction times have lengthened considerably. Preventive policing, where officers maintain visible presence in communities to deter criminal activity, has declined sharply. Official data shows that daily police patrols have fallen by 25% over 5 years. District police departments have experienced nearly 100% personnel turnover in just 6 years. More than 20% of positions remain unfilled in 39 out of 96 regional police forces. Crime statistics reflect this deteriorating security situation. In the first 6 months of 2025, Russian authorities recorded 333,251 serious and particularly serious crimes, the highest figure in 15 years and representing a 10.4% increase compared to the same period in 2024. When compared to pre-conflict figures, the rise is even more pronounced, up 12.7% from the first half of 2021 and 32.3% higher than in 2019. While overall crime numbers have actually fallen to their lowest level in 16 years, reaching 940,500 cases in early 2025, the category of most violent offenses continues climbing. In 2024 alone, 617,301 serious or particularly serious crimes were registered, the highest number since 2010. Between 2010 and 2018, these figures had steadily declined, but the trend reversed around the time of the full-scale military operations in Ukraine. The nature of crimes is also growing more violent. Offenses involving illegal firearms, which numbered approximately 25,000 in 2020, have surged due to weapons flowing from conflict zones and diversions from military stockpiles. Urban centers and Russia's remote southern and eastern regions are experiencing the worst increases in violent crime, including homicide, armed robbery, and assault. Tellingly, for the first time in many years, the number of murder victims was removed from public statistics, suggesting authorities prefer not to highlight certain trends. A particularly concerning development involves military veterans returning from combat operations. Independent investigations have documented that since February 2022, Russian soldiers and officers have been connected to at least 750 fatal or near-fatal incidents involving civilians. These include at least 166 homicides and 112 cases of grievous bodily harm resulting in death. Most of these crimes occur within domestic settings or local communities and are frequently fueled by alcohol abuse. By April 2024, at least 1,130 Russian veterans had been charged with civilian crimes ranging from traffic violations to murder. In approximately 2/3 of these cases, judges recognized participation in military operations as a mitigating factor in sentencing. The number of veterans sentenced in 2023 increased by 700% compared to 2022. while violent crimes against life and health by this group increased by 1,300%. One police officer shared an illustrative encounter with a criminal he had previously helped imprison for 7 years. That individual had been released from prison, fought in Ukraine, and returned home a free man under amnesty programs. When they met again, the former prisoner told the officer directly, "You won't be able to do anything now. This is our time, the time of those who served in the special military operation." This anecdote captures a broader shift in social dynamics. Veterans increasingly view themselves as a new elite class that stands above civilian authority, including law enforcement. This situation is only beginning to unfold. Approximately 500,000 soldiers have already rotated back to Russia since military operations began, but hundreds of thousands more remain deployed. When these operations eventually conclude, there won't be a gradual transition. Instead, Russia will face a sudden influx of combat-hardened individuals returning to civilian life, many carrying both physical weapons that should have been left behind and psychological trauma from extended exposure to violence. Reports indicate that frustration is mounting among returned veterans. Incidents of domestic violence, public altercations, and criminal activity involving former soldiers are increasing sharply. These individuals bring not only combat skills, but often weapons illegally retained into communities that already lack adequate police oversight. The problem is compounded by Russia's renewed issues with alcohol dependency, which had been declining for years but reversed course during the conflict period. Alcohol is a known factor in substantial percentages of violent crimes in many countries, and Russia appears to be experiencing similar patterns. An additional dimension of this crisis involves the recruitment of convicted criminals into military service. Beginning in summer 2022, initially under the Wagner mercenary organization, and subsequently through the Defense Ministry directly, Russia has recruited between 140,000 and 180,000 prisoners to fight. As of 2024, there remained approximately 300,000 to 350,000 prisoners in Russian facilities, which represents roughly half the prison population that existed in 2014. The dramatic reduction reflects the extent of prisoner recruitment for military service. In recent months, recruitment criteria have expanded significantly. Authorities now offer amnesty to convicted serial killers and violent offenders in exchange for combat participation. These individuals, who would otherwise serve lengthy sentences, can earn early release by fighting. The calculus appears straightforward from a military planning perspective. Russia needs personnel, and prisoners represent an available pool. However, the long-term social consequences receive less consideration. Many of these recruited criminals will survive their service and return to Russian communities. They will come back having experienced additional violence and trauma, having learned new skills applicable to criminal activity, and having had access to weapons and tactical training. They'll return expecting to maintain the income levels they received as soldiers, which far exceed what most legitimate employment offers. When they discover that civilian work pays a fraction of military wages, many will likely return to criminal activity, now with enhanced capabilities. Senior Russian officials have acknowledged awareness of these challenges. President Vladimir Putin reportedly expressed confidence in June that individuals who served should gradually occupy certain positions in society, suggesting returning veterans might transition into various roles, including potentially law enforcement. However, no substantial programs have been created to facilitate such transitions. Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin reported that as of May 1st, 57% of demobilized soldiers were employed, while Sergei Novikov from the presidential administration's Public Projects Department announced that 137,000 participants had returned home. These numbers suggest only partial success in reintegrating veterans, and they don't address the specific challenge of criminal amnesty recipients. The notion that returning soldiers and released criminals will accept police salaries of 38,000 rubles monthly after earning several times that amount during military service seems optimistic at best. Police work also lacks the elevated social status that military service now carries in Russia. Why would someone who views themselves as part of a new elite class accept lower pay and lower status to become a police officer? Moscow has attempted some responses. In December 2022, Putin signed a decree aiming to increase police numbers to 938,000 by 2025. That target has not been reached. The structural problems preventing recruitment, primarily the massive pay disparity with military service, remain unaddressed. Without meaningful reforms, including substantially higher salaries, incentives to retain current officers, or a reduction in military recruitment competition, the hollowing out of Russia's police forces will continue. Some analysts suggest Putin might attempt to suppress any organized violence from returning veterans using security forces, similar to how authorities handled the Wagner mutiny in 2023. However, that involved a specific, contained group with identifiable leadership. The challenge posed by hundreds of thousands of dispersed veterans and released criminals across Russia's vast territory is fundamentally different in scale and character. Attempting to suppress widespread unrest would require turning domestic security apparatus against the population in ways that would be difficult to sustain. The situation presents something of a paradox. Russia currently has approximately 2.5 times as many police officers per capita as the United States and nearly twice as many as the European Union average. By raw numbers, Russia should have adequate law enforcement. The issue is that maintaining the level of social control characteristic of the Russian system requires far more police presence than liberal democracies need. The shortages that would be manageable in countries with different governance models become critical vulnerabilities in a system built on pervasive state authority. As the security situation deteriorates, some Russian civilians have reportedly begun forming armed self-defense units in areas where police presence has become minimal or non-existent. This represents a breakdown in the state monopoly on legitimate violence, a fundamental principle of organized governance. When citizens no longer trust that authorities can protect them and take security into their own hands, it signals serious erosion of state capacity. The alcohol factor deserves additional attention. Alcohol dependency in Russia had been declining consistently for nearly a decade before reversing course. The pandemic began this reversal, and the stresses of the current conflict appear to have accelerated it. While not all alcohol consumption leads to violence, there are established correlations between drinking and violent crime across multiple countries and contexts. In an already strained security environment with returning traumatized veterans, rising alcohol dependency adds another combustible element. Looking ahead, Russia faces a situation where multiple crisis factors are converging. An understaffed police force lacking the resources and personnel to maintain order will confront a wave of returning veterans, many traumatized and trained in violence, alongside tens of thousands of released criminals who were promised amnesty in exchange for service. These groups will expect to maintain income levels far exceeding what civilian employment typically offers. Many will struggle with alcohol dependency and psychological trauma. All of this will unfold in a society where weapons have become more readily available due to wartime smuggling and theft from military stockpiles. The timeline matters here. Right now, with approximately 500,000 veterans already returned and operations ongoing, Russia is seeing preview effects. Crime is rising, particularly violent crime, but the situation remains somewhat manageable because the majority of military personnel remain deployed. The real test will come when operations conclude and hundreds of thousands return simultaneously. That influx will overwhelm the already inadequate police capacity and social services available for reintegration. From Moscow's perspective, there are few easy solutions. Substantially raising police salaries would help recruitment and retention, but requires funding that may not be available given other budgetary pressures. Reducing military recruitment would free up personnel for police work, but undermines military operations that remain the government's stated priority. Creating robust veteran reintegration programs would help, but requires planning, funding, and implementation capacity that hasn't been demonstrated. Extending operations indefinitely to avoid the return surge merely delays the problem while potentially making it worse by creating more traumatized veterans. The situation represents what some analysts characterize as consequences rebounding homeward. Decisions made to prosecute military operations abroad are creating domestic security challenges that may ultimately prove more destabilizing than external threats. A police state cannot function effectively without police, and Russia's law enforcement capacity is eroding while the challenges it must address are intensifying. Whether Russian leadership fully grasps the scale of this developing crisis remains unclear, but the evidence suggests inadequate attention to a problem that continues worsening. This concludes today's examination of Russia's internal security challenges. The situation continues developing, and its ultimate trajectory will depend on decisions made in coming months regarding resource allocation, policy priorities, and systemic reforms.